Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies for delaying this commencement of the seminar. One of the problems one faces because of the Delhi traffic. To make up for some time, I intend to be very brief. I welcome all of you to the seminar on Russia's role in the changing global order, its regional implications, and of course we will always examine Indo-Russian relationship. The speakers have been introduced, and I take this opportunity to welcome each one of them. Just a few words on what clause intends to expect or should come out during this seminar is that what is Russia's vision of this world order, and is there scope to bridge the gap that exists between various players in the world? What are the geopolitical, financial, economic and security issues which are going to come to the fore in the years? What are the challenges and opportunities that Russia has as well as India in our relations? One hears a lot of discourse from the West on what Russia should do, and Russian literature is also available on what Russia's national interests are, where Russia ought to go and how it ought to work its policy in the future. We hope to hear out all these issues. And of course, Russia is looking east. What is its policy for Asia? What is its policy for the Pacific? What is the role that it wants to play in the BRICS as well as SCO and many other forums that is part of. Of course, the issue of Ukraine, the events that have unfolded will also be discussed. Security energy is one of the concerns in the future, and I'm sure our speakers will allude to this. Trade and technology cooperation between India and Russia is always spoken of, and I'm sure this will also be covered in detail. With that, I request Mr. Carbonato to take stage and give his talk on how Russia views this world and where Russia intends to go. Thank you so much.
Esteemed Lieutenant General Nagal, Director Center of Land and Warfare Studies, esteemed members of the Presidium, dear friends and colleagues, good morning, and I would like to apologize for keeping you waiting. The traffic jams is something unpredictable in Delhi, but hopefully this was the only obstacle in our today's deliberations. It's a matter of honor and pleasure for me to be here this morning to participate in the seminar. This very thing, the very theme of today's discussion, if you look beyond the message that it carries, tells a lot about the level of mutual respect, mutual trust and mutual understanding that for many decades serves as the strong foundation of Russian-Indian ties. To my mind, only good, close and sincere friends can meet together in such prestigious institution to discuss in an open and frank atmosphere the whole range and various specifics of international problems and our bilateral relationship. So let me start by expressing on behalf of the Embassy of the Russian Federation in India sincere gratitude to the organizers of this interaction. Rather significantly, this meeting takes place in the middle of the year that is marked with very important events in the history of Russian-Indian relations and the world at large. On March 9th, all people of Russia, as well as of CIS countries, celebrated the 17th anniversary of victory over fascism in the Great Patriotic War. In fact, for everyone who cherishes peace on earth, this is a day of pride and sorrow, a day of unfading glory and joyous jubilation. Many generations of sons and daughters of my country and the people of Eastwhile USSR see it as most sacred and important event, which brings together and unites representatives of various nations, irrespective of their profession, religion or citizenship. The Great Victory Day once again gives us an opportunity to pay tribute to the heroic deed of Soviet people who sacrificed their lives and liberated their motherland, who saved the world from the Nazi flag, from bloodshed, untold sufferings and tyranny. We should always remember that 27 millions of lives of my compatriots were lost on the battlefields and on the territories occupied by the Nazis. It's very indicative that despite the sanctions imposed on Russia and all other attempts of Western powers to isolate my country, leaders of almost 30 countries, including the Chancellor of Germany, Ms. Angela Merkel, visited Moscow to commemorate the date. Russia highly values and welcomes the solidarity expressed by India on occasion of the 17th anniversary of Victory Day. President Pranab Mukherjee participated in the celebrations in Moscow, and a special contingent of Indian Army proudly marched on the Red Square during the Jubilee Parade. We consider it as a telling gesture of our long-time and tested friend towards my country. Needless to say, Russian people also cherish India's active role in the last World War and the sympathy of the most illustrious founding fathers, all common sons and daughters of this great land, shown for the heroic efforts and sacrifices of the former Soviet Union. We must never forget the lessons of that war. Therefore, it is unacceptable when some irresponsible politicians in the West encourage neo-Nazism, which stirs up the inter-ethnic strife and escalates military threats today. As regards the cynical, hypocritic and dirty attempts on the part of some forces to rewrite the real history of the world, including the Second World War, and the contribution of nations to the great victory, such countries show immoral and shameless amnesia to sacrifices and sufferings. Such forgetfulness today results in destruction, in devastation in various parts of the world, be it Syria, Iraq, Yemen, or even southeast Ukraine, or anywhere else. This year is also associated with another important date, the 70th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, which was one outcome of the World War II. Both Russia and India stood at the cradle of UN. Both we are sharing the core values and principles of the UN centrally and multipolarity in the dealing with global and regional challenges for peace, security and development. Today there is no alternative to the development of consensus regarding the rules of sustainable global governance in the new historic circumstances, with full respect to cultural and civilizational diversity of the world and the multiplicity of the models of development. Together with India, we stand for sovereign equality of states, non-interference in domestic affairs, mutual respect, and taking into account the interests of concerns of each other, as in the case of, for example, in the framework of United Nations Security Council, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, G20, and other forums. We proceed from a common understanding that in order to reflect new realities, the UN needs a comprehensive reform, especially with a view to make the Security Council more representative and effective, so that it can adequately respond to the changing security environment, to the new challenges. Russia strongly supports India as a responsible global power to take permanent membership in the reformed United Nations Security Council. On the UN platform, as well as at various other international forums, Russia and India decisively condemn terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and stand for collective efforts in fighting global challenges and threats. At the same time, our message to the world is that there is an urgent need to refrain from double standards in settlement of regional conflicts, as well as from attempts to dismiss undesirable regimes under the pretext of fighting terrorism or defending human rights. Unilateral actions and use of force without the UN Security Council mandate, which led to dismal outcomes of operations in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, as well as worsening situation in Syria, are absolutely unacceptable. Considering such dangerous tendencies in the global environment and their regional implications, Russia stands for soonest adoption of the India-sponsored Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. We also hope that India will join the Russian proposal to launch under the auspices of the UN Security Council an in-depth study on the extremist and terrorist threats coming now from the so-called Islamic State in all their aspects across the vast region. The integrated approach implies also that the long-standing conflicts should be examined primarily between Arabs and Israel. The absence of settlement of the Palestinian issue over several decades remains, as it is widely recognized, as one of the main factors of instability in the region and helps the extremists to recruit more and more jihadists. The year 2015 is very special for my country in the context of strengthening cooperation in the BRICS format. As you are well aware, Russia assumed the presidency in BRICS from Brazil on April 1st, 2015. The next 7th summit of BRICS will be held on July 8-9 in the Russian city Ufa. We are happy to welcome participation of Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, in this important event. In fact, today, when we speak about changing global order, one can't but admit that cooperation in BRICS is one of the pillars of Russian-Indian special and privileged strategic partnership. According to Russian foreign policy perceptions, multipolarity, central role of the UN, respect of the international law, avoidance of double standards in addressing the developmental matters and regional conflicts, helps dealing with the new challenges and threats. Commitment to comprehensive strengthening of BRICS outlined in the concept of the foreign policy of the Russian Federation is one of the priorities for our diplomacy. We are currently implementing dozens of initiatives aimed at promoting practical secretarial cooperation. Many of them are considered as at a ministerial level. To be specific, let me brief you about the priorities which Russian presidency in BRICS in 2015-2016 implies. It intends to strengthen positions of BRICS on the international arena, to promote solutions to the most pressing international political issues which represent a priority for BRICS based on consolidated approaches of the 5 member states, to expand external relations of BRICS, to achieve tangible progress in reforming the international monetary and financial system, primarily the IMF, with the support of BRICS, to further develop multilateral financial cooperation within the framework of BRICS, including the full-fledged launching of the new development bank and the contingent reserve arrangement of BRICS countries, to qualitatively identify the new areas of BRICS activities, to promote initiatives aimed at improving the BRICS management and implementing practical measures for gradual institutionalization of the forum. As I've already mentioned, one of the most important areas of interaction within BRICS is comprehensive cooperation and coordination in the United Nations. It will prevent any country from a possibility to impose policies for regime manipulation and push through their unilateral solutions to conflicts by means of sanctions and military force. Various BRICS dialogue mechanisms are aimed at promoting further consolidation and coordination of strategic stability, international and regional security, non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, settlement of regional conflicts, and maintenance of regional stability, consolidation of the BRICS countries against the threats of international terrorism arising from the hotbeds of local wars and armed conflicts like Syria and Afghanistan shall be of primary importance. Strengthening international information security and combining efforts to fight drug trafficking are no exception. International financial and economic cooperation within BRICS will remain the core of financial stability and economic security in the long-time perspective. Let me stress that the long-term objective of Russian Federation in BRICS and accordingly a cross-cutting task of the presidency is aimed at gradual transformation of BRICS from the dialogue forum into the full-scale mechanism for strategic and day-to-day interaction on key political, economic and social issues. This will require it to keep progressively expanding the areas of cooperation and to create an extensive system of interaction mechanisms, including the BRICS Secretariat. All this is intended to raise BRICS to the level of important element in the global governance system of the 21st century. Jointly with our closest like-minded partners, we will deepen interaction to raise cooperation in the framework of BRICS to a fundamentally new level. We are committed to giving this cooperation a shape of multilateral strategic partnership on the wide range of global economic and political issues. Thus, we aim at positioning BRICS as a new model of global relations, overcoming single dimension in the pattern of North, South, or East-West schemes. We highly appreciate India's continued support of the Russian initiatives in BRICS. Speaking about comprehensive cooperation between our two countries, it is worth mentioning that the coming BRICS forum in Ufa will be followed by the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, where important political decisions are to be taken on to officially approve India's bid for full-fledged membership. In the context of the changing global order, specifically new scenarios in the West Asia and the Asian Pacific region, it will be a huge step forward in promoting regional partnership. Russia believes that the SCO, with India on board, will become much stronger given its expertise in countering regional challenges and threats, especially emanating from still unstable Afghanistan. The formation of Afghanistan as a strong, sustainable and prosperous state is a priority of both Moscow and New Delhi. It's true that today the world order is dramatically changing. Profound mutations of political and economical landscape, tectonic shifts in the centers of power in the global scale are underway. The results of this process we witness in the Middle East, North Africa, Asian Pacific region, and finally in Europe. It is becoming more and more obvious that in 21st century international relations are moving towards establishment of polycentric system. In other words, deciding the world's fate cannot and must not be the prerogative of either one state, however powerful it can be, or opposing military and political blocs as it used to be during the Cold War, or a narrow group of the chosen powers staking claims on global diktat. The necessity to create a just, democratic, sustainable and a perfect scenario, a self-regulating structure of international relations becomes more and more obvious. I'm happy to state once again that Russia and India are principal natural stockholders in this endeavor. Intensifying multifaceted cooperation with India has always been and remains a key priority of Russian foreign policy. It is especially topical today when the process of shifting the centers of global economic growth to Asia is taking place. Let's be honest, factors encouraging instability and conflict continue to accumulate in international relations. This is a very difficult stage in the formation of a more just and democratic polycentric system, which is objectively occurring, reflecting the geographical and civilizational diversity of the world today. We keep coming up against the desire of the US and its allies to reserve this trend and to impose their will, approaches and values on other participants of international relations. The stakes are high. Fundamental principles of the UN Charter are systematically violated. Double standards are widely used, and there is interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states in order to reaffirm a unilateral world order. The array of measures is in store for those who object, from unilateral illegitimate sanctions, as it happens with Russia, to direct military intervention. We deem this approach not only unlawful but also short-sighted, ignoring the fact that the fate of the world today cannot be determined by a single state or a narrow group of states. Russia will continue to firmly uphold truth and justice in the international affairs, as well as the right of our compatriots, Russians, anywhere around the globe. No one who is trying to impose sanctions against Russia or to exert any other methods of pressure on my country will ever force us to abandon our positions or principles on key issues. Russia is convinced that negative developments in today's international relations are influenced by the recurrence of one-sided actions, attempts to impose one's values on others to achieve geopolitical advantages, one under the cover of most noble slogans. All this can lead to uncontrolled chaos in some states and regions. The example we can see in Ukraine today, attempts to impose anarchy and in the global affairs. Such alarming developments we have witnessed previously in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and a number of other countries. Unfortunately, as I just mentioned, this very tendency is evident today in Russia's close neighborhood in Ukraine. We consider the situation in Ukraine to be a great challenge, not only to Russia as a closest neighbor of this country, but to the present international system as a whole. A deep and pervasive crisis which fraternal Ukrainian nation is going through, especially since the end of 2013, poses serious anxiety in Russia. In our assessment, dramatic events in that country clearly show that in the minds of some politicians, especially in the West, still there prevails the versions of self-determination of other states and consequently disregard of the interest of others, disrespect of history, which is the presence of double standards. We understand that this is the part of the big game of the Western states towards extension of the NATO and expansion of the European Union in order to subdue Russia once and forever, remove her as a strong, independent world power. To reach these aims, they have thrown the Ukrainians into a painful dilemma of choice between the West and the East. Thus, even more exacerbating is its domestic contradictions. Regardless of the Ukrainian realities, massive open support was provided to the political movements that were considered conduits for Western influence. Moreover, it was done in violation of the Ukrainian constitution when power in Kyiv was seized through violent street rioting supported by direct involvement and the connivance of the ministers and other officials from the United States and the European Union. The new Kyiv authorities, relying on the indulgence of their Western puppeteers, opted for suppression by force of the part of the Ukrainian people that had rejected the attempts to impose the anti-constitutional way of life and the entire country, and wanted to defend its rights to the native language, culture and history. It is precisely the aggressive assault on these rights that compelled the population of Crimea to take the destiny in their own hands and make a choice in favor of self-determination and return to Russia. This was the absolutely free choice, no matter what was invented by those who are responsible in the first place for the internal conflict in Ukraine. The mendacity of the West and those who came into power in Kyiv over the acts committed in Maidan and later in Donetsk, Lugansk and Kharkov and other cities of southeast Ukraine is striking. The attempts to distort the truth and to hide the facts behind blanket accusations have been undertaken at all stages of the Ukrainian crisis. Nothing has been done to track down and prosecute those responsible for February 2014 bloody events in Maidan or massive loss of human lives in Odessa, Mariupol and other regions of Ukraine. The scale of appalling humanitarian disaster provoked by the acts of Ukrainian army in the southeastern Ukraine has been deliberately underscored. According to the latest statistics, more than 6,000 people have been killed there since April 2014, when Kyiv launched a military operation against independent supporters who refused to recognize the country's coup-imposed government, held a referendum in May last year and finalized its secession by creating Donetsk and Lugansk people's republics with their own governments. Russia is concerned with the fact that despite the UN Security Council resolution, a thorough and independent investigation of the circumstances of the loss of the Malaysian airline over the territory of Ukraine has been protracted. The culprits of all these crimes must be identified and brought to justice. Otherwise, the national reconciliation in Ukraine can hardly be expected. The way to overcome the crisis has been opened with the achievement of the Minsk ceasefire agreement in the southeastern Ukraine that was reached early this year on the basis of negotiations initiated by Russia, Germany, France, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation. Russia continues to actively promote the political settlement. We call for the strict and complete implementation of the Minsk ceasefire agreement. Let me remind that the agreement calls for halting of fighting, withdrawal of heavy weaponry, including artillery, from the line of contact by both sides of the conflict, and initiating peaceful, inclusive political dialogue. It also conditions the reintegration of the two self-proclaimed republics into Ukraine on Kiev overhauling the country's constitution, so as to grant them a special status within the nation's borders. Russia is convinced that a constitutional reform with participation of all regions is the most important prerequisite to reach political stability, peace and tranquility in Ukraine. Unfortunately, new round of fighting erupted in East Ukraine in the first week of June. Local independence supporters accused the Kiev authorities of launching an offensive near the Donetsk region, and Kiev forces on their own part claimed that the shelling was a response to the militia's advances. Each and every day bring the news about fresh incidents of breaking ceasefire. Ukrainian forces continue daily indiscriminate shelling of Donetsk city and small towns in the territory of Donetsk Republic, leading to dozens of new casualties among civilians. European Foreign Affairs spokesman qualified the renewed hostilities as the biggest ceasefire violation since the Minsk peace deal came into effect. As we see it now, while declaring their full commitment to the Minsk agreements, Kiev authorities actually reject the underlying principle spelled out in the package measures, namely direct dialogue with Lugansk and Donetsk. But for Russia, it's absolutely clear that a direct dialogue is key to resolving temporarily at least the special status issue, to holding municipal elections there and to carrying a constitutional reform which should fully take into account the position of Donetsk and Lugansk with regards to these territories. In the prevailing situation, Moscow stresses the need for Washington to influence Kiev so as to firstly prevent Ukrainian authorities from sliding into the force-based scenarios, and secondly help launch a political process through direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk. Unfortunately, there are certain forces in the ruling Ukrainian regime which claim that the more the military hysteria is wiped up, the easier it will be for the Ukrainian authorities to persuade the West to step up the pressure on Russia. This is the root of the problem, and that is why, while Russia is continuously sending thousands of tons of humanitarian aid to the southeastern regions of Ukraine, Kiev, with the convenience of West, is organizing the military provocations that bring new casualties among civilian population and lead to deepening humanitarian catastrophe in these territories. The West position for us is clear. It was articulated at the recent summit of G7. If the Minsk agreements are implemented, sanctions against Russia may be softened or even lifted. They say so as if Russia, openly described as aggressor, was the only country to sign the Minsk agreement and should therefore be the only one to implement them. But it is not so. When asked how they will react to more and more instances of Kiev failing to honor its commitments, substantiated by evidence, Western leaders prefer to keep silent. In fact, we regard it as a sign of hypocrisy, duplicity of their position. They clearly see that Kiev is trying to avoid implementing the Minsk agreements in its actual letter and spirit. However, there is a growing evidence that the West does not intend to abandon its plan of increasing its military presence near Russian borders. Now the Pentagon is planning to position arms workhouses in NATO's Eastern European member countries for the purpose of rotating training. Possible destination for the deployment of up to 1,200 vehicles, including 250 tanks, Bradley fighting machines, vehicles, and armored howitzers include Bulgaria, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Estonia, and possibly Hungary. These prepositioned weapons would be enough to equip a brigade of 3,000 to 5,000 military personnel. These plans are expected to be coordinated in time for approval at the upcoming NATO Defense Ministers meeting in Brussels in late June. The proposal, if approved, would represent the first time since the end of the Cold War that the United States has stationed heavy military equipment in the newer NATO member nations in Eastern Europe that had once been part of the Soviet sphere of influence. The arguments used by Washington to justify these plans are quite predictable. It claims that these measures are necessary to reassure its European allies in the face of the alleged Russian threat. In fact, Washington and its European allies know that the perceived Russian threat is but a myth, which can be used to relieve the United States of responsibility for the anti-constitutional coup in Ukraine and the activities of certain forces in Kiev that refuse to end the threat-sided war in Donbass. The United States is fueling tension and nurturing its European allies' anti-Russian fears, also because it plans to use current tension to expand its military presence and hence strengthen its influence in Europe. However, Russia is still hopeful that reasons will prevail and the situation in Europe will be stopped from sliding into the new military confrontation with destructive consequences. Concluding remarks on these subjects, I would like to state that we highly value India's position on the events in Crimea and Ukraine and the necessity of an inclusive dialogue in that country and peaceful resolution of the conflict. It was specially mentioned and clearly underlined by President Putin, who thanked India for a well-balanced, wise and objective approach to the situation in Ukraine. Let me finally come to the last part of this address. This year is also remarkable for another important date in Russian-Indian relations. In autumn, we will be celebrating 15th anniversary of the historic Declaration of Strategic Partnership. This document was signed in the year 2000 by Vladimir Putin and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Since then, Russian-Indian relations has continued to steadily strengthen, and has evolved into a special and privileged strategic partnership having no similar example ever traced in the history of world diplomacy. According to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who will be traveling this year to Russia twice, and this is in itself, this fact is rather symbolic. He will visit Russia next month and for the annual bilateral summit in autumn. The ties between our two nations will acquire greater relevance in the coming days. On June 12th, conveying his greetings and good wishes on occasion of the Day of Russia, Mr. Modi said that India and Russia enjoy unique and time-tested relations, characterized by strong goodwill between our people. He added that it was his firm belief that special and privileged strategic partnership between our nations will acquire greater relevance in the days ahead. In fact, this once again proves that ties between Russia and India are immune to any change in domestic political agenda or fluctuations in the international arena. Strengthening this cooperation remains the key priority of foreign policies of both our countries. Today, the uniqueness of our relations persists in the scope and range. We, be it design and manufacture of the best in the world, BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles, or state-of-the-art fifth generation fighter, the lease of Russian nuclear submarine that was christened as Chakra in Indian Navy, handover of strategically important INS Vikramaditya on conclusion of the world's or construction of the world's safest nuclear power units of Kudankulam. Like no other state in the world, we really share cutting-edge technologies in more sensitive spheres with our friend India. Actually, like no other state, we are engaged in implementing Make in India program since late 1950s. Let me remind that my country was helping India to reach the capacity to produce locally most essential products with construction of the first giant steel mills in Bhilai and Bokaro, pharmaceutical factory in Rishikesh, assembly lines of MiG fighters, and many other projects. Today we march ahead with confidence, expanding the scope of our joint endeavors. At the same time, we frankly discuss weak points and shortcomings which hamper the process the progress of our relations. Potential of Russian-Indian trade, investment, technological and cultural interaction is far from having been exhausted. One of the major areas of concern is our trade and economic cooperation. Through ties, though this sphere has been developing quite dynamically, recently we almost got stuck with the figure of bilateral trade turnover of about US $10 billion, which is not acceptable at all, and if compared to Russia's and India's trade with their main counterparts like China or European Union is rather insignificant. Our countries have necessary resources to ensure real growth and improve the quality parameters of economic cooperation. We are equally interested in working out new models of interactions based on diversification of export and further increase of high-tech innovative products share in our trade. Boosting Russian-Indian trade cooperation was high on the summit agenda last December. Immediate measures are needed to diversify bilateral trade, promote investments, and encourage private and state-run companies to close cooperation. What is more, they set a task to increase the bilateral trade volume up to $30 billion by the year 2025. There exists a strong commitment of Moscow and Delhi to eliminate major impediments in this sphere. We have agreed to work out a mechanism that would allow us to use national currencies in mutual payments. We carry on our efforts to build a reliable and effective transport infrastructure between Russia and India, the north-south multimodal transport corridor. Once implemented, it will considerably reduce the time of delivery of goods and shipment charges. Ultimately, we are moving towards creating a free trade zone between India and member states of the Euro-Asian Economic Union. A joint bilateral working group of the India Eurasian Economic Union Agreement on Comprehensive Economic Cooperation has been set up and will start, is supposed to deliver the results of their joint work very soon. Updating the Russian-Indian agreements on mutual protection and encouragement of investments will also give a positive signal to our business communities. Let me just conclude by reminding that the annual Russian-Indian summit last December was considered to be very productive. More than 50 agreements in the numerous fields of bilateral cooperation were signed, which will definitely give a strong impetus to our cooperation in future. Well, not to take much of your time, I've already used it. Let me conclude by saying that Russia understands and supports the policy of import substitution in the sphere of military production declared by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We believe that only a state which is self-sufficient in this sphere can claim the status of a world power. At the same time, we are convinced that the current situation, when Russia has a similar strategic goal, creates favorable conditions to join our efforts in such an important segment of bilateral relations as military and technical cooperation. The analysis of Russian-Indian ties indicates that our cooperation in this field has significant potential for further development. It includes joint development of production and production of armaments and military equipment with participation of public and private companies, as well as establishment of joint ventures for service centers capable of performing routine maintenance and repairs of military equipment for all types of Indian armed forces. I'll conclude with one more consideration. New Delhi perfectly understands that in terms of geopolitics, Russia is a kind of a bridge between Europe and Asia. It is quite natural that my country maintains close partnership relations with Beijing. We have a dialogue with Islamabad as well. These relations are of separate value and meaning for Russia. We are interested in strengthening contacts with all the Asia-Pacific countries. In our turn, we are not jealous of India's contacts with the United States and other countries as well. However, I want to assure you, this doesn't jeopardize in any way our historical and time-tested friendship or cast a shadow on the character of Russian-Indian special privileged strategic partnership, which is unique in terms of world diplomacy. Thank you very much, and I wish success to this seminar. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Carmelito, for the special address. Now I would like to request General Nagal, Director Clause, to hand over the clause memento to Mr. Carmelito, please. Proceeding with the seminar, I would request the chair, Ambassador Sajana, to take over from me, please.
Thank you very much, General Nagal, Director, Center for Land Water Studies, my good friend Sergei Carmelito, Counselor in the Russian Embassy to India, Professor Sanjay Pandey, General Vishambar Dayal, distinguished participants, friends. First of all, let me say what a great pleasure and delight it is for me to participate and chair this very important seminar that is being organized by CLOSE. Since this is the first time that I take the floor, let me convey my deep appreciation and compliments to the former Director of CLOSE, General Dhruv Katoch, who is here for the excellent stewardship of this institution, and I am confident that General Nagal will also take this forward and further expand and diversify it. I think the fact that we are discussing the foreign policy of a close, friendly country like Russia, its global position and relations with Russia in an institution like the Manekshaw Center, having been organized by an institution like CLOSE, is very significant and very symbolic in itself. The organization which has taken up this initiative is very significant. The venue that has been selected is very significant. And I think the large participation in this conference is also very, very significant and important, which means that there is great interest amongst scholars, academia, practitioners to know more about this relationship and also to support and take it forward. I think it's also important that this seminar on relations with Russia is being held at this juncture, not only because, as was mentioned by Mr. Sergei Carmelito, that the Prime Minister visits Russia in another few weeks' time, from the 8th to the 10th. He will be participating in the BRICS summit, and he will be participating hopefully in the SCO summit as a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But I think also because there is much greater need for knowing, understanding and appreciating what is happening in Russia, in Europe, and the relations of Russia with all the countries in its neighborhood, with the United States and others. And I think this seminar will go a significant way in informing. We have two very distinguished panelists with us who will speak, and they will focus on different aspects of both our relations with Russia as also on the global perspective of Russia's foreign policy. Now, as has been mentioned, the Prime Minister will be attending the BRICS summit in Ufa in Bashkortostan, and the SCO summit will also be taking place back-to-back with the summit. I'm sure several members of this erudite audience would be aware that the last time that these two summits were held together, the SCO summit and the BRICS summit, that was about 6 years ago in Yekaterinburg in 2009, again when Russia had the chairmanship of both these organizations. And I'm sure several of you would be aware that this was a stratagem that was devised principally by the then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev to accommodate India in terms of attending the SCO summit. I'm sure several of you are aware that India has held the status of an observer to SCO since 2005. Now at SCO summits, the only participation that observers could have is participate in maybe the half an hour or 1 hour long inaugural session, and after that there is no role for them. And if some reports are to be believed, the then Prime Minister of India had commented that I am not prepared to go for the SCO summits to participate in half an hour meeting and otherwise wait in the waiting room having a cup of tea. That notwithstanding, the other observer countries, whether it was Pakistan or Iran or Mongolia, their presidents, whether it was General Musharraf sometime or President Zardari, even President Ahmadinejad, they would participate regularly in these SCO summits, while from our side the participation was either by our Minister of Power or Minister of External Affairs. But in 2009 it was suggested by President Medvedev that the Indian Prime Minister would be invited for the BRICS summit, and then he would participate in the SCO summit in the next morning, where the observers would be in a position to participate, and after that immediately leave for his next engagement, the next assignment out of the country. This time again, it is the same format that has been adopted, and as I said, hopefully the Prime Minister Modi will be able to participate on 8th, 9th in the BRICS summit, and following that with the in the SCO summit also as a full-fledged member. That being the case, I would also take this opportunity to thank Russia for its steadfast support to India's membership of SCO, and it has been pushing for this, and I think we will be able to realize, and I quite agree and concur with the assessment by Mr. Karamanito that India's participation as a full member in SCO will not only be helpful to handle developments as they are taking place in Afghanistan, but also, I'm sure, in many other areas, whether it is in terms of promoting connectivity or energy security or human resource development. As far as the foreign policy of Russia and its position in the world today is concerned, I don't think there is possibility of adding anything more to what Mr. Karamanito has already shared with us and spoken with us. His presentation has been very extensive, very detailed, very comprehensive, and I would like to thank him sincerely for sharing these thoughts with us. But I would like to just maybe flag a few points. We have two panelists who will be speaking. First on the political and strategic and security dimensions, and then General Vishambar Dayal on the economic aspects. But I would like to just maybe flag a few issues which could be or might be taken up by the panelists, and maybe would also be useful when we have discussions, when we have the floor available for discussions. Number one, I think the relations between Russia and Europe and the West, the United States and Japan, have been warm and cordial, but still full of tension. Maybe starting after the end of the Cold War, maybe since 2011, when we had the demonstrations on the streets of Moscow after the elections, after the parliamentary elections to the Duma, that this tended to sour relations significantly, because the American leadership, particularly the Secretary of State at that time, was charged with having fomented some of these demonstrations and some of these problems and difficulties for the Russian government. After that, whether it is Russia's support to President Bashar al-Assad in Syria or its position on relations with Iran or other countries also have tended to sour relations to some extent. But of course, needless to say, the one incident that has really defined Russia's relation with the West has been the Ukraine crisis, which started possibly the beginnings can be traced back to maybe November, December of 2013, and then led to the what Russia says reunion of Crimea with Russia in March last year, what the West terms as the annexation of Crimea. But that has been, I think, the defining point, the turning point. And I think from there, beyond that, we can see how relations have evolved. What has been mentioned, Russia has always been focusing on and always been talking about resolution of the problem through consultations, through dialogue, through negotiations. Of course, Russia does feel that its security is endangered with a large number of countries on its periphery, on its borders, having joined NATO, about 7 of them in 2004 and another 2 of them in 2009. And with whatever we have heard this morning, the forces of Europe, of NATO, of US coming very close to the borders with Russia. This definitely induces a sense of insecurity. On the other hand, what we have seen at the end of the recent G7 summit in Germany, we have seen that there is greater confrontational statements, there is greater belligerence that is emanating from the United States. And I think since we are speaking to an Indian audience, you would have also seen when President Obama was here on the 27th of January, earlier this year, his response to a question from a US journalist about the situation in Russia, in Ukraine, was also in very aggressive tones. So I think these are some of the issues that will be touched upon, how to go forward from here, how to take it forward from here. What are the implications, particularly for Russia, for the region, for the world at large, and for India? I think these will be some of the issues that our panelists will take forward. Now, a few comments on India-Russia relations, which have also been covered extremely extensively and comprehensively by Mr. Caramelito. I think a couple of points that I would like to flag. Number one, as has been mentioned, it is a long-standing, time-tested relationship, and relations with Russia form a key pillar of India's foreign policy. As has been mentioned, 15 annual summits have taken place already, and the 16th will take place in autumn this year. Again, very, very remarkable that in 1 year our Prime Minister will be visiting Russia on 2 occasions, one in July and again later in the year. Both President Putin and Prime Minister Modi are strong leaders, they are nationalist leaders, they are visionary leaders. So I think we can see significant development and improvement in our relations. Russia has been supportive, as I mentioned, of India's membership of SCO. Russia is also supportive, as Mr. Karmukhi mentioned, of India's membership of the United Nations Security Council, as also of APEC and NSG. And discussions on that are going on, and we hope that they will reach a favorable and a fruitful conclusion in the very near future. I think we also need to realize that this particular government is, of course, with its focus on neighborhood and extended neighborhood, is very committed to strong relations with Russia. I'm sure everyone remembers the remark by Prime Minister Modi in Fortaleza when he met President Putin last year in July, and he said that if you were to ask any child in India as to which is the best friend, and everyone would mention that it is Russia. And even recently in December, when President Putin had come in the discussions, he said to the President that times have changed, but our friendship has not. So our friendship is very, very strong, based on very solid foundations, whether it is in the area of military and defense cooperation, it is in the area of civil nuclear energy, it is in opposition to terrorism, it is in the area of cooperation in the area of space or science and technology. It's a very wide canvas on which our relationship is based. As has been mentioned, trade is an issue, and I'm sure General Vishwambar Dayal, who led a delegation recently to Russia, will speak something on this. I think it is good to set the targets, but also we need to find ways as to how these targets can be realized. Mr. Karmukhi also mentioned about relations with Russia's relations with China and Pakistan. I would like to just suggest here for consideration that obviously we don't expect any jealousy on in the context of our relations with the United States. But I think it would be somewhat simplistic to equate India's relations with the United States to Russia's relations with Pakistan in particular, particularly in the context of supply of defense equipment and training and exercises. So I think that is one area where we possibly can have some exchange, frank and a detailed exchange of views to have a better understanding, so that the concerns of both sides in this context are addressed. There has been mention also in terms of a free trade area between the Eurasian Economic Union. I think that is a very important area. I recall this issue was discussed when Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh visited Kazakhstan in April 2011. And it is a matter of some regret that no further movement has taken place on this so far. But I do hope that with these two leaders and with the Prime Minister also visiting all the 5 Central Asian states when he goes to this region in July, that discussions and the conclusion of this will get an impetus. With these few words, let me extend once again cordial welcome to each and every one of you. Thank General Naval for this initiative to organize this seminar, and pass the floor to the first speaker, that is Professor S.K. Pandey from Jawaharlal University. All of you are aware he is a very distinguished and eminent scholar who is already been introduced. He will speak on Russia's foreign policy in a changing global order and analysis.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sajjan, and also thank you, General Naval, for inviting me here. In fact, so much has been said about Russia's worldview, about Russia's understanding of the present international situation by the senior counselor, Mr. Sergei Karmeletov, who is a very good friend of mine, and by Ambassador Sajjan that they have literally preempted me. So I would start on a slightly different note in trying to understand one thing that has clearly come out from both these presentations is that Russia has a complex and, if I may call it, problematic relations with the West. Their worldviews, their approaches, their understanding of the international situation is quite divergent. And in order to better appreciate this, I would like to bring in element of Russia's history and element of its identity. One of the important writers of our age, Huntington, once talking about Russia, talking about Russia's identity, he said Russia is a torn country. It is torn between its European and Asian legacies. That Russia's identity is a complex one. Huntington, for one, would not accept Russia as part of Europe. He said the defining features of Europe, of European development in the last 500 years are completely absent from Russia's cultural historical experience. And what are these? He says Renaissance, Reformation, overseas colonial expansion, commercial revolution, industrial revolution, enlightenment. He says all this is missing from Russia's experience, and therefore Russia, according to Huntington, is not European. Now, but the issue of Russia's identity is a complex one. I'll just take you a few centuries back and just for 2 minutes. Sometimes in the early 18th century, one of the greatest Russian monarchs and perhaps the father of modern Russia, Peter the Great, it is believed, launched a new drive, a program in Russia to bring Russia closer to Europe, to modernize Russia, to make it an important European power, and some would say to westernize it. Peter the Great's policy, and he introduced quite a number of reforms, including changing the calendar, creating a new navigation school, creating a new capital that was St. Petersburg, and bringing about many other administrative and other reforms, and bringing European technology and science to Russia. Now, most of Peter's reforms were continued by his successors, but there was a reaction from within in Russia. Many of the Russians believed that Russia cannot be Europe. Russia cannot imitate Europe. And some of these believed that Russia is distinct Slavic civilization. This led to what we generally call a Slavophile Westernizer debate, rather Westernizer Slavophile debate in the early 19th century. The Westernizers believing that Russia is part of the larger committee of European nations and Russia should join Europe. On the other hand, the Slavophiles believe that Russia is distinct Slavic country which followed Orthodox Christianity, which has its own social norms, which believed in communal way of life, for example, and of course the autocracy, the Tsarist autocracy, was one of the important features of Russian polity, Russian society. So this was what we generally call the Slavophile Westernizer debate. And in the 20th century, again we say, so Russia's complex interaction with Europe has taken many shapes and many stages. In the 20th century, there were another group of scholars who were called the Eurasians or the Evrazistva, who said that Russia has commonalities both with Europe and Asia, but at the same time is distinct from both. So, and they also said that Russia can act as a bridge between Europe and Asia, and it has its own genius, it has its own contribution to make to the world civilization. So, the point that I'm trying to highlight is that there has been a long debate in Russia about where Russia belongs to, whether Russia is European, whether Russia is Oriental or Asian, or whether Russia is distinct and unique. Now, in the post-Soviet period, this debate has taken a new form, and it is generally believed that Russian foreign policy has been greatly influenced by this debate between what now we call Atlanticists or liberal internationalists and Eurasianists. The Atlanticists or liberal internationalists believing that Russia is part of the larger European Committee of Nations and Russia should integrate with Western political economy and should have close interaction with Western security apparatus like NATO. On the other hand, the Eurasianists believe that Russia is between Europe and Asia and has had close interaction with both Europe and Asia, and Russia should maintain a balance between Europe and Asia. Now, in the early period, in fact, the major changes in Russian foreign policy can be seen at the end of the Soviet period, when Mikhail Gorbachev became the General Secretary and later the President of the Soviet Union, and he initiated his reform programs, Perestroika and Glasnost, openness and restructuring, and his foreign policy initiatives have been generally captured under the new political thinking on foreign policy. And basically the point that Gorbachev was trying to make was that new technological, economic, international and political developments have taken place in the world. He was talking about mid-1980s. And he says that because of these developments, the world has become much more interconnected, integral and interdependent. And he says that the problems that the world was facing at that time, which I believe the world faces even today, problems which he enumerates as, for example, arms race, or the threat of nuclear annihilation, or the threat of environmental degradation, or the threat or the problems posed by third world debt, which he calls third world debt. He says that these are the common problems of humanity and therefore they need to be resolved collectively, and therefore an ideological approach to foreign policy, to international relations is not going to help. Countries will have to de-ideologize their foreign policy and look at the world as an interconnected, integral, interdependent whole and talk about common concerns of humanity rather than what the Soviet Union used to talk about, the class interest or the class struggle or proletarian internationalism. So moving beyond ideology to emphasize common problems and common concerns of humanity. That was the start of a new era in Soviet foreign policy, which largely he also talked about a common European home. He believed that both geography and history has placed Russia or Soviet Union at that time squarely in Europe, and therefore he says that Europe and Soviet Union or Russia shared a common civilizational legacy and heritage, which he called common European home. He also talked about a new framework of cooperative relations with the United States. He moved beyond Lenin's and Khrushchev's concept of peaceful coexistence, and he talked about a new framework of cooperative engagement with US, with Europe. With Asia Pacific, he also focused. In fact, Soviet relations with Third World were another area of concern in Soviet Union at that time, because many in Soviet Union believed that these relations were quite one-sided in the sense that Soviet Union was subsidizing many of the Third World allies and friends, and therefore Gorbachev talked about a new framework in which the relations should be mutually advantageous. Relations between Soviet Union and third world countries should be mutually advantageous. So this was the basic framework and understanding on which Gorbachev tried to build upon a new framework of foreign policy for Soviet Union, which to a large extent was continued by the post-Soviet Russian states. Now in the post-Soviet period, the new Russian state was of course faced with a very complex situation in which they had new borders. 300 years of conquest or assimilation or acquiring new territories was slowly, all these territories which were acquired during the past 300 years or so, in one go, in one day, they were all jettisoned, they were all abandoned, and Russia acquired a new border. Not only that, 25 million Russians found themselves out of the mother country, placed in foreign countries, the other CIS countries. So, and then there was this very complex and very huge task of political and economic transition. Transition from a single-party communist state to a multi-party liberal democracy. Transition from a command economy, state-regulated, state-managed command economy to a market economy. So the challenges were stupendous. And the new leadership of Russia wanted cooperation of the developed countries of West, of US, of Japan. In order to bring about the economic transition, they wanted more aid, trade, technology, investment from the West, from the developed countries. So, and they also wanted lessening of the erstwhile tension between East and West. Cold War, of course, was already over. So Russia was looking towards Europe with lot of hope. They were expecting that Europe will come a long way, something like a Marshall Plan will be launched in order to help Russia in its political and economic transition, and that Russia's core interests will be taken care of. So this was what we call the Atlanticist phase in Russia's foreign policy, in which Russia was trying to come closer to Europe. Russia was trying to join Western political economy, basically G7. Russia was trying to create a new framework of relations with the Western, NATO, for example. But this phase of Russia's ability or attempt to create close cooperation with Europe, with US, did not last for very long. And it ended with between 1994, 95, 96, when who was the new foreign minister in 1996? Primakov. When Primakov became the foreign minister in January 1996, he launched a new program in which it is generally believed that Russia moved from the Atlanticist direction to a Eurasianist course of its foreign policy, because Russia was not satisfied with the extent of help and support that was forthcoming from Europe, and therefore they started adopting a new independent foreign policy. Russia also believed that many of their core concerns and their apprehensions were not being taken care of, that the West was wanting Russia to just become a camp follower. For example, Russia's objections and apprehensions about NATO expansion, Russia's concern about NATO policies in Kosovo, in Yugoslavia, 1999 bombing of Yugoslavia, of Serbia, was something that Russia took great offense at, because as you know, Yugoslavia was a fellow Slavic country. Subsequently, Russia realized that the West and US was not willing to take into account Russia's concerns, and in 1999, 2000, there were many other developments. For example, the 1998 economic crash, which greatly adversely affected Russia's economy. But subsequently, 1999 onwards, you see many new developments which have which came in a big way to help Russia. The first was the upsurge in the price of the hydrocarbons, 1999 onwards. Then there came 2001, the 9/11 developments, after which Russia believed that it got a new opportunity to yet again start a new era of cooperative relations with the West by coming out openly in support of US war on terror, supporting US policies in Afghanistan, helping it, not objecting to US acquiring new military bases, air bases in Central Asia, and hoping that in return US will be more accommodative of Russia's concerns vis-a-vis its domestic problems, mainly Chechnya, where Russia has been facing a problem of terrorism and secessionism for very long, but Russia was criticized by Europe for its handling of Chechnya. So Russia believed that now that Europe was also facing the same problem of terrorism, so perhaps Russia's concerns will be better appreciated by Europe, which happened for a time being, but very soon Russia realized that there are limits to Russia's cooperation with Europe, with US, and US will never be able to fully appreciate Russia's position and concerns. So NATO expansion, it is generally believed that at the end of Soviet era, when Gorbachev was trying to mend relations with the West, with NATO, and when Gorbachev did not object to the collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe, Gorbachev did not object to unification of Germany, Gorbachev did not object to US actions against Iraq in 1991 after the Kuwait crisis, despite the special relationship that Soviet Union had with Iraq, treaty relationship 1972 Soviet-Iraqi treaty. Despite that, Gorbachev was willing to go along with US on the issue of Kuwait. So Gorbachev had hoped that this will create new trust between East and West. So this was the mindset with which Russia had thought that there will be a new type of relationship. But after 9/11, subsequently, the US adopted many policies because of which Russia's aspirations and hopes were dashed. One was the withdrawal, US unilateral withdrawal from the ABM Treaty in December 2001. Then in 2003, the US invasion of Iraq was again a big blow to Russia because it did not get any clear-cut. The US did not have any clear-cut mandate from the United Nations Security Council for its actions in Iraq. Similarly, many of the subsequent actions, especially the expansion of NATO in Eastern Europe, in the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Czechoslovakia, all these countries becoming members of NATO, Russia thought that now that the Cold War is over, now that Warsaw Pact is no longer there, so what is the need for NATO? And NATO's expansion into this former communist states of Eastern Europe and then into the CIS states, into the post-Soviet states also, that was something which Russia felt was unnecessary and was a provocation, and it was encroachment into Russia's sphere of interest. And this is how Russia saw it. And then Western attempts, what Sergei Karmelitov has very rightly pointed out, unilateral Western actions and Western support for what is generally called the color revolutions in Kyrgyzstan, in Georgia, in Ukraine, which Russia believes was interference in internal affairs of these states. Now, the basic problem that Russia believes lies at the core of its relations with Europe is the fact that Russia believes that there should be, Russia, as Mr. Sergei very rightly pointed out, believes in a multipolar world order in which the UN has a central role and in which the global or regional problems should not be resolved without clear-cut mandate from the UN. A world order in which different countries have autonomy of following their own models of development, are free to adopt their own independent foreign policy course, in which the opinion of different states is taken into account, in which the West and the US does not impose its own worldview or its own opinion or plan of action in resolving various regional issues like Syria or Iran or Iraq or Yemen or all these issues. So the basic point that Russia is trying to make is that there should be multiplicity of approaches, both as far as domestic development is concerned, that various countries should be allowed to follow their own very individual and unique models of political and economic development without interference from outside, and that any action should be based on a multilateral approach rather than a unilateral approach. So this is the fundamental point of difference between Europe and Asia and between Russia and Europe. And Russia believes that there is still scope for cooperation between Europe and Russia, provided Europe understands that some of Russia's basic concerns will have to be taken into account, especially Russia's core interest in its neighborhood in the post-Soviet states, and also that Russia's independent path, whether of domestic, political and economic development or in its foreign policy, need to be acknowledged and respected. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Pandey, for this comprehensive historical overview of development of relations of Russia with other global powers, particularly Europe and the United States. Now we have General Vishambar Dayan, and he will speak to us on relations between India and Russia, with focus on economic and security cooperation. You are the first.